Okay. Well, we've been knocking things around for quite a while, talking about what's going to happen in this building and what we need to do. And so we got to quit knocking it around and come to some conclusions.
I just texted you, sorry.
So, thoughts?
So the big one is, and this is where Carrie and myself, we've been talking about this, what, for 5 years now? I mean, it's been, yeah, the master plan. How do we start doing this? What do we do? I mean, we've moved bonds and fines around. We've made sure that that's a better working environment. There's some, we're trying to get functions of the county, whether it be the courts or operations. We're trying to layer them to make it easier. People that are walking in to just pay a fine, it's easier for them to come in right by the handicap where we're at. That made a lot of sense to do that. The big thing is we still have certain offices that, over the next 5-10 years, we'd like to get all the courts on the second and third floor. That's been kind of the intent. And then the discussion starts coming back to, well, okay, what are we going to do? We have, 218, I guess, whatever room number we're giving them this day. That's empty. We need to figure out, are we going to use it as soon as Axline's out there, using it for temporary? Do we use it as a training room or another courtroom, or what do we do that way? And then there's a discussion when we have arraignments, they're just, because of technology and what's changed is the capacity and space is different. And so we have Axline's courtroom that has a pillar in the middle of it, which makes no sense, and the jury box is basically sitting on top of the defendant and everybody else. And so that's where the discussion really needs to be on those courtrooms. We also have courtrooms upstairs on the third floor. Judge Clark, who's in Thompson's old courtroom, Judge Jarman. Those courtrooms, we need to get into those and start gutting. We actually did a field trip over to ISU on the new technology stuff of how to control all that stuff. As we start moving forward, how do we make this more efficient so anybody walking in can operate these rooms, make them work? And so that's really the discussion. And then Jason, we start talking about operational space. We have other things that the legislature keeps throwing down at us that we have to provide, and that's been the big, how do we do this? So that's kind of where we've been at for the last, and bringing everybody up to speed. So there's been the discussion, Judge, I don't know if you've been brought up to it, we're looking for an HR home. We have a plan and an idea to move arraignments up. Do that courtroom would be 218. It would mirror upstairs of Jarman's courtroom then. And then downstairs there would be a training room on one side and an HR suite. Then HR is not in any elected official's office. That was kind of the long-term plan of what we were going to do. Carrie would have then, would probably be on the first floor, or if we could move into wherever we could find space, but there would be the old chambers. And then Carrie's office suite and this training room would become a courtroom just like upstairs. And that would be probably this year. And then as we start following on, Axline, Jarman, and Thompson's courtrooms then have to be done because they're to the point where they're there. That's all there is to it. So,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Covey, I think the only thing I would add to our longer-term conversation is when we think about courthouse, we think about both our courthouses. So both this one and our juvenile justice building. And as we're master planning this, we gotta put that juvenile courthouse on top of all this as well. So that's the only, I think everything else, Commissioner Tubby, is related, has been kind of core to the conversation for a number of years. And we just also want to talk about our two courthouses.
well, and to go along with that, just not the courthouse over there, but juvenile probation and some of the other things in their facilities, what we're looking at, and this has been the discussion that we've had. Public defense is going to consolidate all into one building, so they'll be moving to the Sterling building. That'll open their suite. Probation, because of security concerns and everything in that building, just me speaking, not for the board, but for my own personal, I don't want to spend $150,000 on that building for security upgrades. That building is okay as an office building, but that is not a very wise use of that. So I would see juvenile, and it's not been an official decision, or probation, moving over and occupying the old public defense in the annex. Juvenile needs some areas for treatment rooms meeting. They need ADA compliancy, which that building would give them. That would also take some of the strain off of them being so compacted over there. That would help open that up. There's some other aspects that we would be looking at for other people that could maybe move into that building. And then yes, we would have to be talking about the court over here. of what we would do and get it into the timeline. But I think a lot of it is the master plan comes back to a lot of other counties. They've just gotten to the point where for space and auxiliary structures or auxiliary functions, the courtroom is like the operating room. 6 doctors use one operating room. Is there courtrooms that we can pile down and take a courtroom that instead of remodeling that we're putting it into a specific function? Is there things that we can do that way? Because when we remodel these courtrooms at $150,000 a pop, we need to have the courtroom then occupied as much as possible, because then that really maximizes those dollars. And if we're going to do that, I have no problem with remodeling courtrooms and suggesting that they be done, but how do we fix all the other auxiliary buildings or auxiliary functions that we have to get in? Juvenile justice, probation, HR, all these things. Public defense wants meeting rooms and all that, and that stuff's coming, and we need to start preparing for that.
So before, I just have a question. Is the administrative building off the table still?
It's always an idea getting kicked around, but the problem it still comes back to is, are you going to spend, we went from a projected cost of building a 40,000 square foot building for $4 million to a 40,000 square foot building costing 8 to 10 right now. That's the big problem that we're running into. I would love to have an administration building and just plop one down back here and move everything out. I think that would be a great plan, but I don't know the financial feasibility of it right now, because it went from being construction costs at less than $200 a foot or now over $400.
We have looked into that. We've ventured with partners. That hasn't panned out. It just didn't. We had high hopes. A partnership would have been great. But I want us to be local, really. If we start spreading out further and further, it defeats a lot of our function. We already have people that are unhappy, and if they have to go to here, to this building, to that building, 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks away, that's causing problems. So I think we need to look at what we have here at the current time, and what can we do to make it function for a few more years.
Because I think in the 5-year scheme of things, you're going to have to do something. Either you're going to have to build an admin building and go back and really just start building courtrooms and stuff like that if we go like other counties have, or you're going to have to build an additional courthouse, which either one, I don't think the voters would approve a bond. And so the big problem is well, then how, and you're not going to get it may come before you judge, but I doubt, but I don't think you're going to get a consent order for a courthouse that we have a courthouse. I don't think it would. I think it would be a lot longer than 5 years. I think it'd be 10 or 15 years down the road, and we would have to be busting at the seams with health and human safety issues to warrant that. And so how do we do this? I would love to build an annex building right here and just build an admin building and just put everybody there and vacate this and only the courts. But I don't know how feasible that is right now. We have ARPA funds, but ARPA funds aren't going to go that far. And if we only use ARPA funds for that, I don't even know if you could build a courthouse or something like that and make it fly. I think auditing would probably, the pen would come sailing at me if we said, let's just use $17 million and build an admin building.
Just in terms of how we structure the conversation, because I kind of hear a couple, 3 different things to throw out. Certainly we have immediate office needs, right? And some very defined short-term decisions that we have to make. I'm hoping we can make those in the context of the second thing, which is the 3-year or however long master plan that we want to say these immediate steps are in alignment with our goals that we all agree on, that are in our master plan for how we want to address some of these long-standing issues. And then we overlay on that kind of the third piece, and it could be, we kind of figure out where it's on the timeline, and that's that, are we using the space we have in the courthouse, all of our spaces, to the greatest interest and efficiency to the public investment, right? So that when we look at courthouses, and Jason and I, we talked about this in different things, when we look at like a really high volume courthouse like an Ada or a Canyon, there are both administrative functions to pull off, like if we talked about master calendaring of how all that fit in, and just to be clear, what we're talking about is kind of calendaring a courtroom. We're not asking there's a traditional sense of master calendaring where it's there's a rotating judge, and that judge just hears everything that comes in that day. We're really talking about trying to maximize the efficiency of our courtrooms, the operating suite idea that Commissioner Tubby's talking about. So
I stole it from Jason, by the way.
Yeah, there's both an administrative calendaring component to that, but there's also some structural components. Typically in a facility that has a master calendar, that they have kind of co-located chambers that are non-public. There's space for judicial assistants and support staff that serve those chambers. And then there's non-public access into those courtrooms. And so we're not moving judges out in the spaces amongst the litigants as they're going to court. So I think that, you know, I'm all in on that conversation of are we best serving the public and what can we do to be most efficient? Because I don't love seeing dark courtrooms, but sometimes we have, Cindy and I were talking about this, sometimes you gotta have the space when you gotta have the space.
Yeah.
Right? So like in a non-COVID time when we have a high-profile crime committed in the community and we need to do an arraignment, we're gonna have press, we're gonna have victim family, we're gonna have members of the public who are interested, and we just need to be thoughtful of yeah, right now we can kind of have a different look at how we do court, and some of that's going to continue, but at some point we are going to have, we will need space, and that doesn't mean we can't move an arraignment on a high-profile case to a different courtroom versus the traditional space that is used, but I just want us to be thinking about that. So what is our short-term, our immediate need, and then what is our kind of our long-term master plan, and pick a number. Is that 3 years from now? Is it 2 years from now? Is it further out than that? And then I think we can really get all this stuff in sync. Because I think that's been some of the holdups. I mean, and we have some shovel-ready projects, and certainly we have recommendations or discussion items that have been kicking around for years, but I think we can immediately move on. And when I say immediately, I look at
Dan,
and
Jeff,
Dan.
hey guys, we're looking at you.
You know, because immediately now in a construction world might mean, I don't know, 6 months or a year from when you start swinging hammers on something till when we can take occupancy of it.
Well, and that goes back to kind of the HR suite issue. It's triggered a discussion. So for us, do we take this training room and make it an HR suite? Well, then it defeats the conversation that we've had multiple times about trying to get courts up, things down, because it makes it easier on that. And we don't necessarily, as much as we love Ryan, he shouldn't necessarily be in the commissioner's chamber. There was a reason why, and that reason has now come and gone and passed, and we have an HR function that's moving forward. And so that's what I say is for us to go through and build an HR suite, if we do it up here in this training room, well, then we're just right back in the same problem. So I think for the immediate is that discussion.
We're not paving roads and then digging them up.
Exactly.
Putting in a water line. That's just plain and simple. We're not gonna do that.
If we can flip those two to begin with, I think that's the immediate thing is let's have that discussion. No, we don't want to go upstairs and build an HR suite just to rip it out to build a courtroom. So it makes sense to me that right now we want to flip the arraignments, and either arraignments comes up here and you do arraignments basically in the same size courtroom as what Judge Jarman's courtroom is, or we have a discussion about Axline's courtroom and Axline moves over here and we take Axline's courtroom with a pillar in the middle and a jury box. We don't need a jury box. We rip it out. We make it towards the arraignment courtroom. And we move from there. Then there's also the discussion about building a suite of, if we're going to maybe fall down onto condense some courtrooms for use, but maybe we build a suite of judicial chambers for judge and support staff, and you have it, and it is closed off to the public. There are some ways in this courthouse that you could do something like that, but it's having that conversation of, okay, we're going to drop one courtroom, and we're going to turn that courtroom, we're going to go in and rip it all out and remodel it, and we're going to put 3 judges' chambers with support staff, and the way that we'll wall it off and block it off, we could actually do it to where a very secured side only for judges and staff to get through, but it would still be open to the public on the courtroom side. I mean, there's ways we could do that, but it would just take some creativity, and Dan and Jeff and all of us. But I think the immediate need right now is we need to have the conversation of 218 and arraignments, and basically we need to tell Dan right now, because he's got a gap, go or no go. is what I think today is kind of the, but then fall into that later discussion.
One of the things that I've been thinking about quite a bit as this has come up is, and I think everybody in this room should be on the same page, both in timeline and in number. So when we talk about master calendaring, and if we go down that path, essentially how many judges can share a courtroom? And we really don't know that right now. Carrie and I were talking about this morning, and I said, if we were going to do this, what's the number? Where is it? And I don't think that we really can accurately say right now how many we could get rid of. So it's
Judges
really
or courtrooms?
courtrooms.
Bad joke.
You know,
I actually think we're
obviously,
going to need more judges
I
here
agree.
shortly, so
No, and
that's the problem.
That's the hesitation you need to have with this, is that getting rid of courtrooms. You gotta be careful about that, because just Carrie and I know of the numbers in the state, we're
We're getting there.
highest numbers now, especially with our district judges, as far as workload is concerned.
Yeah.
Case numbers, I mean. And so those are increasing, and I know the attorneys in the room, our prosecutors know that.
Yeah.
And they've seen that occur, especially with the criminal case. So, I mean, even if we did something immediately, I would never tear the jury box. I would never recommend you tear the jury box out of Axeline's courtroom, even if we just used it as an arrangement.
As a backup.
You've always got it. You'll never get those back.
Yeah.
Once you get rid of them, you'll never get them back. And you know how much it costs to put a courtroom in. So be careful about doing that sort of thing when it comes to remodeling. We can figure out some other space-saving issues, I'm sure, but getting rid of courtrooms, you may live to regret it.
Well, and that's the other discussion with that, Judge, is make sure any room that we do, we want to make sure that those rooms are wired and start to get to the point where if we need to make this chamber, this room, for instance, I've always envisioned sooner or later this is going to become a courtroom and we'll move downstairs somewhere. I'd love to get Aaron Thompson out of the corner down there. 1:30. I don't like having a judge's chamber and his courtroom where if somebody really wanted to get mad and drive a semi or even a pickup truck, you could do some serious damage in that courtroom. And that I would rather to have commissioners down there than Aaron down there with his. I mean, I hate to say that, but just hey, I am. I mean, he deals with a lot more volatile issues in our courthouse than we do most of the time. Have that chamber moved upstairs, switch this into a full courtroom. It's basically the same size. It's, that's what we're looking at. And so it's the cookie cutter. How do we move that? But it comes back to is if we start adding judges, and we're going to add judges, we need district courtrooms then. It's probably going to be our next hit. We make sure we build courtrooms then that are capable of being a district courtroom. What is this, a 12-man jury box for a district court?
And that's what we did with the most recent one.
Yeah.
It was a push to make it a magistrate. Judge Oxline to go up there. My recommendation, and it was followed, was to make it a district courtroom, because you can always use it. You can always use it as a magistrate
Yeah.
courtroom. Just because you have a 12-jury box doesn't mean you can't use it as a magistrate. And it has been used. It's had really good dual use over the years that we've had it, and I've been very happy with how we put that together up there. So those are some positive things that we've gotten out of that.
And I appreciate what you said, Judge, but we can't keep doing the same thing that we've been doing. We got to do something if we're going to increase judges, if we're going to increase things, the legislature's got to allow us some way of financing it. We can't keep doing what we're doing right now. I mean, look at Bear Lake County. They ended up finally giving them a special way to build a new courthouse. We got to have some avenue, and we got to do something to actually force the legislature to say, here's a means of financing some of this stuff, because we just keep cutting into the budget otherwise.
The biggest and scariest thing is we'll never get a bond passed to do any of this. So it's going to have to come within budgetary constraints of where we're at. And I love being prepared and having duels and what we can have, but I don't know how much longer we can just have. We need to have every square foot of space in this courthouse as maximized as possible, because as we're starting to pick back up with COVID and we're starting to see it, I actually got in a fight with some people the other night, a verbal fight, not a physical altercation, just make sure that's clear, about the counter at bonds and fines, because we put solid surface quartz down instead of just Formica because it was cheaper. Stuff like that, we put that countertop there, that'll last 50 years
Yeah.
or longer. And that's what we're talking about, is doing stuff like that that's how do we maximize, and we'll spend money when it's smart, but we can't just keep, and I don't want to rip out courtrooms and remodel them right now, and go through that expense if we have to move or maneuver or do something else. I
So
want to
there's
have that
other
plan.
spaces. So we have a huge vault in your office that we're almost empty, that we can tear out and use for space.
The one behind the wall,
You bet. I mean, it's huge.
it's the same size as Aaron Thompson's chambers.
There you go. So that is about, the treasurer's office is going electronic. With all of their stuff, their vault, is it really gonna, do they really need the vault as a vault?
You're gonna have a vault.
It could be a smaller, someplace vault type thing, you know. You've got different places. That vault downstairs where, by next to my office, you know, eventually will be all cleared out. That's gonna be some space. So to sit here and wanna cut courtrooms, this is just my opinion, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong with you guys over here. To cut courtrooms, I think is, I mean, I know we've talked about the remodel and moving arraignments up here and moving the judges up here and everything, but my opinion is if you really want to get rid of a courtroom, you get rid of axe lines because it does not work as a courtroom. The pillars are in there, you can't see anything, the audience can't see anything, and really, he should be maybe down here in Rains was left, and that can be a suite of offices over in axe lines court because of the way that it's set up and because of those pillars, it is a terrible courtroom to have a trial or anything else in. You know, so if in the short term you need a place, you know, remodel this one, move him down there, leave arraignments, take this suite of offices right here. I mean, you gotta start somewhere, and if you need it quick, to me, me and Carrie were talking about this earlier, that would be the fastest way to get you some space. Or you tear out, we get everything else out of that vault, which I don't think would take much, and you make it into offices.
The one thing about that,
You need a door.
well,
You gotta cut a door in it, and you can have access to it.
it's concrete, it's reinforced,
Yeah.
and it's mortar, it's cinder block that's been filled.
Mhm.
And to do that, you're talking now, we're not talking for $500 a square foot, we're talking $600 or $700 a square foot.
To
It's
cut
gonna-
to cut
also
a
with-
door?
Well,
Also
it's
with
just
that
not the
room.
doors, it's the fire suppression system in there, it's, there's other things in there, there's no window, I mean, you're talking, it's gonna get really expensive
Hey,
really
we
quick.
worked for years without a window over there, and we didn't.
No, I'm not
we
talking
just
a window,
worked.
I'm just talking having it to where, we follow the building code.
Mhm.
And that's the problem that we have is, some space that we have is very, I mean, Dan ripped a vault out upstairs for the new courtroom, and it's expensive. Those are the things that, as we start talking about expense versus practicality, where are we going at? And this is where I say, coming back to, if we start looking at space, and we start allocating space per employee, and we follow the government standard, the federal standard, okay, you get 110 square feet per employee, a supervisor gets 125 square feet per employee, a division director gets 150, and an executive gets 200. That's the federal guideline standard. So if we want to go through and do that, and we can follow that standard, but everybody just better be prepared that offices and stuff may or may not change and things go there. Or we need to start looking at, how do we do this? Everybody's got to figure out a way to compromise here on this, because this is not something that we're going to fix just by having one person or one group does it this
You're
way.
very committed to wanting to put your administration type offices all on that first main floor, on the main floor downstairs, right? Is that where you wanna be?
It keeps people from wandering up here. That leads to the security aspect too, is the one way to start getting people out of there is, the only people then that are starting to come up on the second, third floor are people that are here with courts.
So you want to move your chambers down there?
I would love in 10 years to be able to move everything downstairs if we could.
Jason's office?
Possibly. That space, I was going to say, one of the things that I'm going to do is start keeping plats and surveys where they're supposed to be, which is in that vault. They're not supposed to be out there. They're not supposed to be with GIS. They're supposed to be in the clerk's office.
So maybe some of the move isn't
So
realistic.
there's going to be some moving, but
I don't, functionality
Yeah.
wise, we cannot move, we cannot separate everything.
Not everything,
They're
but
ju-
as
it's
best
not
we
gonna
can.
happen.
You can't really do that, can you?
No, no. We're gonna be tearing up a lot of asphalt if we try to do something like
So
that.
have you thought about what you do want to move, what you can and do want to move down there?
And that's what I'm saying. The main thing is if we can get the courtrooms off that floor and get them up, it starts helping security, because then you're not separating a high volatile courtroom on the first floor and another high vol. Where do all the problems happen with security? Judge Thompson's, Judge Clark, and mainly in those magistrate courts that are that are high volatility. That's where, as I've watched security respond, that's what's happening. And so first floor should be, you should have all of your threats in one area. That's the easiest way to secure them. Okay, so we put them there. If we have them in an area where the only people going to courtrooms are people that need to go to court, that makes it to where it's easier to keep an eye on who comes and who goes. Then we can start cordoning and securing those areas. If we have people on the bottom floor, we can actually make it to where this back staircase, you can get out for fire, but you don't go up for security. I mean, there's things that you start looking at and doing that then it starts becoming easier for those things to occur. Yeah, getting Jason's office, we'd love to get that to happen, but I don't know if that would be there. The prosecutors are separated like this. I'd love to get Jen's office out and get the prosecutors back up. We need to get the assessor's office, the treasurer's office, and the clerk's office, all three need to be right next to each other. That's probably going to be an administrative building because I don't see any other way how to do that. But in the meantime, is there ways that we can move things around to try and make it easier to secure, easier for the public? The hardest thing is when the public comes in here and just trying to figure out where do they do a marriage license, where do they pay a bill, where do they do this. We have, you know, they look for the court assistance offices and some of those other things. They're wandering all over everywhere.
Daniel, is there any, have you looked at Axeline's courtroom? Is there anything that can be done to it to make it more user-friendly?
Not with the pillar in the middle, I don't think.
It'll always have to be there, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's just
You can move some things around. I mean, I suppose you could move the configuration of the courtroom around to make it a little more.
Good.
Well, and that's what we say. Arraignments downstairs right now has a jury box in it.
No.
No
No,
jury box.
no.
And that's what I say is, if we moved arraignments up onto one of the, even into Axeline's court, and even if you kept the jury box or whatever, this courtroom over here, you'd build a 12-man jury box into it and make sure that it was usable, because then you're going to gain that courtroom. This space goes way down there because the biggest problem in the arraignments is even using a lot of when you have those high-profile cases, we have 3 very large district court chambers. One of them is huge, and that, I mean, if we need to do that, or whatever, that, I mean, it would be your guys' call, but there's courtrooms that could facilitate that. The courtroom as it sits down there, it's to its end of life anyway, and we're going to have to remodel it. So you start looking at the wire nest up on the desks, and it's like, oh my word, how do we not have a fire? And so that's what I'm saying. We have to remodel this anyway. This one, are we going to use it for a training room and HR suite? Well, we go ahead and do that, but
you don't want to.
But exactly, if we're going to do that, let's move that downstairs.
So if we moved, I mean, if we literally put the footprint of Jarman's courtroom
Mm-hmm.
there, and the footprint of you're suggesting, Commissioner Thompson's footprint comes upstairs.
That would be later down the road, but sooner or later we would, and it would be based upon how we could move some things.
The only thing we don't have, if we bring up that as a jury room.
Yes, that's the only. Now, axe lines maybe here, maybe depending on how chambers go. Maybe you move if when we start moving some courtrooms between Aaron Thompson and this one, maybe this one becomes more of a traveling courtroom where you already have judges if they're walking around or doing whatever. We're trying to figure out how to secure that. Is there a way that you could get this courtroom or something where you could secure on this back side, or maybe have it in different points? That would be a discussion that we would have to have as well. I don't know how you would do some of it, but I think we could, where the third floor is much easier to secure than the second floor. But the second floor, if you have courts just down here, maybe these become administrative offices. This one, maybe this becomes judges' chambers, and maybe you have 2 sets of judges' chambers or 3 sets of judges' chambers in here that for the traveling judges and some of that other stuff, they're walking to courtrooms anyway, and I've kind of watched them as they walk. They're not always necessarily right next to the courtroom that they're in. And that's what I'm saying.
They are.
Well, they
When
try.
they're- when they are. That's where they sit. Their chamber is there. Their clerk is there. They may walk around the courthouse, but that's where they sit.
And I get, but that's where they are. But nothing says, and I appreciate the fact that we want to have in an ideal world the chamber right next to the courtroom, and nobody ever is in there, and for security purposes we have it. Well, we have a cordon and search as you come in this building. If you have cleared security with a weapon and you are still in here in this room, you're not going to stop anybody then. I hate to say this, so there's no reason to say, well, we can't have judges walking around the hallways or whatever. I would love to not have that, but there's no difference than if a judge has to walk down the hall to that. I would prefer not to do that. I would prefer not to have that happen. But in this courthouse, this 1954 courthouse of this postmodernistic design, that's what we're stuck with right now. And so That's what we got to try and figure out. How do we mitigate it, and what do we do?
So right now, though, where we're at, in my opinion, is we're looking at the courtroom that's downstairs right now, changing that into an HR suite plus a smaller courtroom at this time, until we have the one above changed to a courtroom, which is the storage area right now, right?
Or we just
That's-
do it at the same
I
time.
think you can do it at the same time.
We just
Well-
basically.
If there's money
Yep.
that we can
Well,
use.
but that could still be utilized for the court down there instead of, I mean, we're
Well-
not losing anything at the present time
You'd have
while
to
we
frame,
come upstairs.
You'd have to frame a wall in and make sure you have public seating space that meets court standards, and we would
Okay.
have to have a security block.
I'm just talking what's gonna happen within the next year, looking towards what's gonna happen in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So then we'd create a second court, or make a court on this floor, right there in the corner.
Yep.
After that, we would end up looking at Axline's court and this one to see about moving the courtroom below us up here on what we could do there to utilize that space.
With that one, while you're on that topic, not to interrupt, with arraignments in there, after talking with Brian and Carrie a little bit, if that's what works best for arraignments, then okay. But a lot of times arraignments is where the action really happens, right? And there's heated people, right? Some of the
Well,
walk-ins.
yes, and there's more than just arraignments in that courtroom, and I'm not sure
Right.
people are understanding that. It's not just arraignments in the afternoon.
Right.
So, I
But-
mean,
I have a little bit of an issue with that being everything that happens down there, happening right there, because I have families coming in to my office every day, all day long, people coming in with kids, and I would like to separate that as much as possible. Just, if that's where it works best, we'll make it work. I will probably change where the entrance is to my office at that point, just so that people aren't trying to come in this way and that. But
Well,
I've
that's
got a
the-
lot of families that come in for marriage licenses or passports especially, that I would like to keep separated if I can. If that's where it needs to be, we'll make it work.
Well, and that's again.
And I appreciate that, but we gotta have a starting point.
correct.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm trying to get to right now, is we gotta have a starting
When we
point.
get
Right.
back to normal, and we have, so
We will
there's-
never
there's-
be back to normal.
Well, we will as far as people coming in or for court.
It'll never
And-
be back to
and
normal.
Arraignments is just not arraignments in the afternoon when you have a few people come in or be arraigning or arraigning people in jail. We have preliminary hearings Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every morning down there where we have all the witnesses, the cops, the victims, everybody comes in there. Every 3 days a week, we have small claims the first Monday. I mean, every Monday morning where you have all those people coming into that. So when you're saying you're gonna cut it off, how small are you gonna make that? We still have to have people in there to do the job.
That's
We
why.
still have
We're,
to have the people to be able to fit in that courtroom.
that's why we're talking about moving it up into another courtroom.
Well, yeah, but you
That's-
but you keep
that's-
talking about cutting that
But,
off.
but you have to start somewhere. That's where I'm telling you.
We have
We
too much
can't
space
keep
that's
doing what we're
wasted,
doing.
And as I look at
We're
it,
But you're
not
gonna spend
advancing
money-
at all.
You're gonna spend money to fix something, you're gonna put a Band-Aid on it instead of starting the master plan, which is building this courtroom up here in 218.
so we could do it
Correct.
at the same time. And what we're saying is
We
we've
need
got
an
it
HR
right now.
suite at this time, right now.
There's temporary places he could go right now, right? We have some spots.
What kind of office requirements do you need right now? I mean, how many people are we looking to put into
Yeah.
an office separated from the commissioner's office right now? What do you need?
I need an office for the HR director and a second HR employee and a place for like secure personnel files at a minimum. We'll probably also, it would be nice to have some space too for like scanning and some work like that where we're gonna, be working with digital.
And then until we're able to kind of hammer out the need for a larger training room, conference space for HR, and then I expect it's not exclusive for HR.
No,
it'd be open
no,
for
it's open
That's
for the
right.
county.
So a place to train
So,
would be.
so I think there's some things that we can do, like right now. I mean, because when we look at some of the function reports that has evolved, if we're talking about 2 offices plus a secure space for holding files, I think we can address that without looking at the arraignment courtroom segregate the function by dividing the space in half. Like for example, we have some folks who throughout the pandemic have been working remote, and I expect will continue to work remote because I think we've got some proven service models that doesn't diminish what they're doing for the public. And if Ryan and the new hire need space right now, we can find space on the first floor. The idea I'm thinking of is when we look at our family court services office suite down there on the first floor, right next to archives and the marshal's office. Lacey Parker, who's a state employee, Sandy Thowen, who is a state employee, and then Kim Talbot, who is a county employee, plus the reception space. 3 of those positions are largely working remote. They come in for appointments only right now. If we need to immediately address office space separate from commission chambers, I think we can immediately begin a discussion, particularly if we're looking at, let's say on Jason's thought that if we're not going to use Judge Axeline's historical space as a courtroom, or if we're looking at office suites or something like that, I mean, those folks could be folks who would be moved up to the second floor. I mean, I think there's some things that we can do immediately to address the commission's concerns about getting folks space. I mean, we got to figure out some temporary space for those court folks. But since they are primarily working remote and you guys are working here in person, I think there's a prioritization tied to that.
And if they're only coming in for personal appointments, we have space on the 3rd floor right now that we can convert to just a meeting office.
Yep.
So we do have that ability just immediately, if you'd like.
And that might give us enough runway to pull off the, we'll get the bathroom remodel done. Axeline temporarily goes, and then when I say Axeline, well, Judge Axeline would go down there. We start building the new courtroom. The magistrates have a seniority discussion and decide how they want to do that. And then a new judge goes in there, and then we're now looking at the space around that, whatever courtroom is vacated. If it's Axeline's courtroom that's vacated, or whatever, we're able to then start kind of taking those steps towards the master plan. But we can help get Ryan a office, right? As soon as we can start moving desks and things around.
Well, and I think there was a very good point that was brought up. I actually think we need a space audit, because I would really be interesting, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, is you start using the Office of Personnel Management standards and looking at it as what exactly and who has what. I think it would be really interesting to look at the number of employees that operate in this courthouse, how many have space, how many don't have space, and we start to equalize that function, because there is something to be said about that it's going to take. If we can get a building built, if we started today, we'd be lucky to have it in the next 3 years. And so that's why I say is this is going to be a problem in this building and the current space allocation. And the other problem that we're going to run into is the building across the street is end of life. It's going to be one of those buildings that here in the next couple of years, we're going to have to make a very serious discussion. Do you dump a bunch of money in it or rip it down and build something or do something? And so that's what I'm saying. I think we need to have a space audit, and I think we need to look at what is every office doing, and we need to set some very rigid standards, even by ordinance. This is how it will work in the courthouse. This is how it goes. This is the allocation of space. You have 6 people. And they're just a frontline worker in cubicles. You get 660 square feet. That's it. And I think that's really the discussion that we need to have.
I wouldn't argue with that. But right now, I think we're solving one short-term problem, but we still haven't advanced in where we're at
There needs to be a master plan.
on what we're doing.
There needs to be a master plan.
But the master plan
Thank you for
involves-
that, though.
Right.
Look,
Yeah, we
that'll,
hadn't even considered that before.
well, we didn't
Know
know.
about it.
We didn't know, and thank you for
And
that.
that's why we need a space audit, is because there's some of this stuff that when we go that, and when we start a master plan is everybody's got to be able to walk in that room and walk out 80% mad.
Well, right now,
I mean, that's just how it's going to have to go.
we've invited Dan and Jeff here, and we haven't heard a word from them. You guys, what about the functionality of this building and especially remodeling? I want your input.
So this move for me, would be easiest if Ryan did go to a temp spot so that we could build courtroom in 218 and then put arraignments as 100% HR. Because what I'm running into, if I divide that in half, I'm spending money on stuff that we're going to tear out immediately. So
Okay.
efficiency, that'd be the best. If Ryan can find a temporary home, build courtroom 218, and then HR suite down on the first floor in arraignments.
Comments?
No, I mean, that's always the most efficient, not to have to build temporary, just rip it out and do it again.
I'm just frustrated.
I could tell.
I'm just frustrated.
And that's why I'm saying, we gotta do something. We've come into this meeting, we've had this talks before, so we gotta have a plan when we leave here. So I'm asking your input on this plan.
I know, I'm thinking. I'm going back to the statement, never waste a good crisis. What are the lessons that the courts have learned from COVID that if we could apply going forward, that you guys could do differently to maximize space as well as the rest of us? For example, I was just kind of looking up the recommended dimensions of a courtroom, and for just the basic litigation area, it was like 1,000 square feet. And then some additional footage for viewers. But I'm wondering, why can't we use technology and put viewers somewhere else? And then your courtrooms are that 1,000 square feet, things of that nature. Because I'm trying to think, how do we future-proof ourselves? Because as Judge notes, we're going to need more judges in the future. Okay, well, what we're talking about now does not future-proof us at all. But if we were to make an investment in technology and the way we utilize our space, can we do something like that that will give us a future proof to a certain extent, because we're always going to be constrained, but can we use some of the lessons that we've learned during the last 18 months, 2 years, to mitigate our space issues? And that's what's frustrating me, is it doesn't feel like we're willing to go down that path. We all just want to try to keep doing things that we've always done and shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic. And so that's why I ask is, I mean,
It's a timely question, Commissioner. Captain Ballard was just kind of querying on the exact same lines, because we do want to be looking, to the next TCA, to the next ADJ, to the next whoever succeeds all of us, right? And I hate to give the answer, but the answer is it depends. And the reason why it depends is a lot of the stuff we're doing right now is under temporary suspension of rules regarding personal appearance. And if the court, when I say the court, the Supreme Court, if they go and they say, hey, after the past 24 months, we are going to now kind of redefine our expectations for what is personal appearance and when that defendant needs to be transported from the jail and sit in front of the district judge for purposes of felony sentencing, or looking at any of the other proceedings that we're now presumptively holding remote, if that carries on in the future, then we're right there at the table and we're talking about, there's court that you could probably do that looks, where the judge's chambers looks more like a production studio rather than a historical kind of office suite. Because if you look downstairs in Raymond's this morning, in the Raymond courtroom where Judge Hun was holding court, since I think the first big emergency suspension of rules, Judge Hun has been fulfilling his Bannock County calendar from Preston. Okay, and we have folks who are joining by Zoom. We still have walk-ins, but we're able to use technology to flip the camera so both the person who walks in can see the judge and the judge can see the person who's walking in. So this hybrid model. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do, but our final answer to help us inform a master plan is going to be what the Supreme Court does in terms of defining the sandbox in which we operate. And that's about what is going to be required for personal appearance. And Judge Nass might have some other ideas on that too.
And then you have to realize that each judge is going to have discretion, and they have a great deal of discretion. And some judges are not going to don't want to continue with the path that we've been on. I agree. We're always going to have some space for the public.
Yeah.
And that's a requirement by statute. But it doesn't mean that we can't live stream, which I have been for the last 2 years. Now, even with live sentencings, we're live streaming hearings from the courtroom on YouTube. So those are available to us, but not every judge is going to embrace that. Now, Carrie and I can help with that a little bit, and we can make some decisions along those lines, but we're always going to have the final say is going to be that discretion of that judge saying, no, I don't want to proceed in this manner. So I think that's an unknown that we're going to have to deal with as we get new judges, or these judges are replaced. Hopefully we're getting more and more tech-savvy judges who are coming to the bench that are embracing the technology that we have available. But Carrie's right. Until the Supreme Court makes a final decision on what these rules are going to look like in the future, we're kind of operating in the dark here. We know what we have now, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you if we reopened in 6 months completely and the Supreme Court set down what the rules are going to be, I couldn't honestly tell you what they would be. I do believe that they're going to give us more discretion, but I don't know to what extent that's going to be. I mean, they were pretty adamant about some things when they made their last order. So,
As we talk about that, I wonder, again, this is just all hypothetically, because I agree and I understand that we don't know until they come back, but if we had one big courtroom upstairs that could handle a big crowd and the big public trials, and then several of these smaller hybrid where you don't have as much of a gallery for the public to be in, you know, could that solve and future-proof and also put us in line sort of with where the Supreme Court may or may not go?
and I think you kind of have that right now on the 3rd floor.
They're not, it's only got the one big one.
Right, Corneroli's is the big courtroom. My courtroom, Gaviola's courtroom, and then the new district courtroom, the seating capacity is not that great. There's not as much as you think can fit in there. So I don't know if you can do anything more at those courtrooms up there. You might be able to look at the magistrate courtrooms in some manner, but again, they're pretty tiny. They're about as efficient in space as they can be right now, as far as I can tell. I don't know. I'm not.
And I don't spend a lot of time up there, so I don't know exactly what the layout
And
is.
yours is, you know, you have a jury room, and there's one other jury room for the district court. We only have 2 jury rooms, correct, for 4 district courtrooms?
The magistrate, the jury room that's between Clark and Jarman.
That's for them, they share that, but I'm talking about district
We could
down
put,
there.
we thought if we ever had a jury in 312, we would put, we have enough space in that jury room to do a 12-person.
Yeah,
Right,
if
that's
we
what we
needed
agreed
to,
to.
but there's
But
still, if
it's-
you have that many, if they have juries and they have, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
we have 3 jury rooms that we're sharing with all the courtrooms
on the
third
top
floor.
3rd floor.
The other question that I had is Judge Murray's courtroom. Is there a reason that it has to be over there? Why could we not bring him over here, which would free up space over there to do some of the things they need? But again, I don't know.
So the conversation there has always been, and Commissioner, I'll kind of, there's nothing that says it has to be, right? But I think there's some very practical from court operations and also from security of why it's best over there. Being able to have the juvenile courtroom connected in the same building as the detention center really reduces moving kids in custody back and forth from detention center over to this courthouse. That's a big one. The other part of it is although less of a consideration, having that courtroom in a way where Judge Murray and his staff are able to work closely with the juvenile probation department. The way that juvenile probation works with the court is different than how adult probation works with the court. And their problem-solving approach and the degree of collaboration, we collaborate with those who we see every day, right? Having that juvenile justice center with detention, probation, and the judge is pretty dang ideal. That being said, not every county has the luxury of doing that. You might call it a luxury, but for me, it's a very practical, common sense way to do it for security and best service.
And I fully support what they're doing over there. I didn't know if there was a reason why he was over there other than exactly what you talked about, so.
So I've got a quick question. The suite right now that Kim and your family court services are in, the one that you offered as temporary, that has an entryway, an office, and then another office, is that right?
And then there's like a cubby on the other side. It's like a
There's
floor
cubby on
We
square.
actually have what we call 3 offices, but only 2 of them have doors. Although, I smile at Dan because there's an inside joke. So you have Kim Talbot's office and you have Lacey's office that, the back of those offices face the windows.
Okay.
Gosh, I'm turned around.
Parking lot.
Sandy Thoen, who's our guardianship conservatorship coordinator, when you walk in the door, you take a hard right, and it used to be kind of a break room file area.
Yep.
But it's now, there's a desk in there. and
So,
we have space.
what if we just made that the HR suite
Mhm.
and then deal with all of the other issues, but wouldn't that be a good long-term plan even? Or is there,
Just have to look at it.
I think the square
I've never
footage
been
is there, actually.
and the location, being selfish, is awesome for us because you'd be right down the hall.
Right by paywall.
Yeah, and so then that would leave any other spaces that you moved. The only thing is it would displace your people.
Well,
but
not
if they
necessarily.
had-
I mean, not for right now. I think we've made that commitment as far as them working remotely. And we have space upstairs for when they have to actually come in and meet with someone in person.
So
We
that
can
might
make that.
just solve the HR issue, and then all of the other issues you guys can address when Axline can move back, then you can start moving your courtrooms and all of that stuff, but that would take care of HR possibly even for the long term. I don't even know how much remodel that would take, if any.
Well, and that's where we're at right now. We're gonna go look at it. We're gonna go look at it and
I'm okay with that.
see what we have. And the conclusion I've come to out of this meeting is that I haven't walked through the floors on this courthouse. I don't know. I've never been back in that suite at all. And
And it's
on the
been-
3rd floor, I've walked the hallways and I've been in the bathroom. That's about it. So I would like to go look.
Well, and I think that's where it comes back to into that, to doing a space audit.
That
Is-
suite's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, it is.
It needs gutted and redone.
Well,
We were talking about when we were doing archives, because the way that the walls, they just kind of framed over some
Right.
windows and doors, and it's not really, and what you had to work with was interesting at best.
Right.
You know, you still may end up wanting to build out intermittents and we do the shift, but I think that goes on our master plan.
Well, right now, the way I see it, I'll walk through with you. And I think that anybody else that wants
Come
to.
grab me. and-
Okay.
and we'll just all go.
I'd like to just walk through the courthouse, but at current time, let's go look at those suites, move you guys, finish up the bathrooms, and after that, we'll meet together in another month, not knowing what the Supreme Court's gonna do, and have better ideas. I think that right now, we're kind of on a holding pattern until we find out what the Supreme Court's doing on parts of it. Do what you say, let's do an audit, and see where we end up. I mean, that means we didn't come to a big conclusion, but thank you for an option here.
Commissioner, can I throw this out? Like as we're looking, and I'll just call it hotel space for Lacey, Kim, and Sandy when they need to come into the office. I mean, we'll sure look at, and we've got spaces available on the 3rd floor, but with the space over in your offices that Ryan and his team are vacating, if we need to get some hotel space for one of those folks, is that something we could talk to you guys about? Or you got people
Well,
who are
We have a
not
PAO
really. We
right
have
now
a
that's working
PAO
in
that's
Jeff's
working off a
office.
little round table in Jeff's office right now.
I just want to throw that out there.
There's two
Keeping
spots back
track
there,
of our-
correct? Where Ryan sits and then another spot right across the
Yeah,
hall from you.
and then I use an intern as well. That's been very helpful. So really, it's 2 full-times and then an intern.
And there really isn't 2 offices there. It's kind of like you said, it's kind of a break room in front of an office.
Yeah.
It's not an office.
Well, and again, as we start going through that and where we're moving and trying to fix and take care of some stuff, there's gonna be a full shift down going through a lot of these floors and what we're gonna look at.
Yeah.
Comes back to, I really think, now that I think about that, no, we need to go back and let's do an audit. And we're gonna go back through and we're gonna say, this is what it's gonna be, this is how we're gonna do it, And we're just gonna have to start setting some very firm rules, because and it's gonna be the only way that we're gonna keep the peace with everybody, because everybody's offices are growing, everybody has these mandates we have to try and fulfill, and I don't know any other way to do it, other than just say, hey, this is where it is. Dan, you need to move a wall 5 feet that way.
I'm just gonna make a comment, just real quick, that people have talked about master plan for, 10 years ago, I was supposed to be down where the old driver's license was, because they were gonna make a master plan. Nobody has ever made a master plan.
Well,
They always talk about they're going to, and then
Well-
they kinda do, and then they just go away from it, then we get new commissioners, and then they go do something else, and nobody's ever made a master plan. Dan, is there a master plan? Have you ever seen one? Jeff, have you ever seen a master plan for this whole courthouse?
So we're gonna surprise the heck right
I'm
out
going
of you.
to.
There is going to be a master plan.
So this is the
Okay, so
problem. This is
finally.
this is the problem when you have a master plan, and I hate to say this. Is it comes down to anytime I've talked about space in this building, everybody's walls go up, everybody wants to go to war, you're not touching my space, and this is how it goes. Now, we can do it one of two ways. Everybody's willing to come to the table and work, we actually work through it, and we don't have people blow us off. Or I'll just make a recommendation to the board and we'll just put it together and this is what it is and I don't really care. Because we're the ones responsible for the court. And that's been the problem I've run into for 6 years. Anytime we've talked about anything and we've had to go, let's do this, everybody's hackles go up, walls go up, defenses go up, you're not touching my space, don't touch my space, stay away from my space, we're not gonna talk about it, we'll put it off
Nobody's
for
ever
it.
showed anybody anything. It's always
Oh,
talking
no.
about we need this space for this and we need
We've
this.
had to-
There's never been a.
You can't even get to the
drawing of-
map because people's hackles and defenses go up, just like happened in this room. And I watched it. I actually was sitting here writing notes. And as soon as we started talking about certain areas that all of us have a fancy to, or departments that are falling under us, or this, or how does it affect me, instead of saying, how do we actually do this? And so there's two ways. Either we can try and work together about it, and in the past, every time we've talked about getting a master group, people get irritated and we don't have it because people don't want to do that way, or we're going to hurt somebody's feelings. If we can't come together and have a conversation, it simply is going to have to be the three of the commissioners, and we will just dictate this is how it goes, and it just became a dictatorship.
Let me throw this out as a positive example of our collaborative working with these going forward. The court brought to the table
There you go.
some office space
Yeah.
to help all of us to do the best job we can for the public. Let's do it.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you.
I actually think this was a great
No,
conversation.
have a conversation.
So,
Well,
I mean,
and like I said, I'd like to just put it on the calendar for
Month?
December,
Good.
first or second week in December. Let's meet back and spend 30 minutes and see where things are.
And Dan, me and you are going to go have
We're
a
gonna get a
we're
master plan going.
we're going to have a space audit first. We're going to write it down and we're going to say what every single department has and everybody's
And I will
using.
take you up on coming and
Yeah.
looking. Like I said, I haven't been in them.
I'd love to throw this out too. For this state FYI, Bannock County, I mean, there's a cost when we remodel a courtroom to rewire it for audio. It's like $34,000. If we can do a magistrate courtroom in this state FY, so ending
June.
ending June 30.
Yeah, June 30.
That money is available in this state FY for Bannock County.
Well, and that's why I say we need to. There are things why we need to get on it.
So when
And
we're thinking about it, that's money on the table that we can't always count on in the next FY.
That's why we have these conversations. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone.